Make sure. That's my face. Yes. Yeah, we're live streaming. Now we're live streaming. Okay.
Okay.
So
I'm just going to get my phone so I can see if you're texting me or something.
okay. I'm gonna spotlight Mark. Because spotlight Mark. Me. Okay. Oh, you do? And do you want me to? I've got him spotlighted, which is you can't if you pin. Oh, actually, it does work just fine to like because we don't have multiple people. Do you need me to sign in over here? Yep. Okay. Okay.
You might have to mute the audio out on that one, but that way Mark should be able to hear the speakers as well.
Okay. I don't want McAfee. What happens if I don't want McAfee? I just hit skip.
Oh, because that's from me installing into the reader. So I wanted to come with.
Oh. Okay.
Emily, I love your shoes.
They're JD originals, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Sort of birthday going on.
How was JD's birthday?
It was good. Well, I mean, we had a family funeral.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So it was like- but it rounded it out good. Had a drink with moms.
Nice.
And his mom got like a bunch of kids, like 3 bags. So it's really nice. It's her baby.
Yeah.
And even though we're in town, our schedules are just so. Yeah. He said he's been telling you.
What did I do? That's what I did wrong there. Okay,
I
cool.
hope you don't have audio in your presentations.
No.
Okay, good.
Okay, cool. All right. Can you hear me, Mark?
Just great. I can hear you just great.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Right.
I'm gonna mute the Mark coming through.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So, do you think you could either do one of two things? Monitor the chat
Okay,
at the computer over here and let us know if somebody says something like has a question.
okay.
So, let me show you. I'm gonna set Mark down here. Sitting you down there, Mark.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and plug this in just for fun. It's a new computer. It's not like my old computer. No, it definitely has more battery. That's good. Battery. The port's not very long. Okay, so the place where the chat's going to be at is actually right here. So under this chat right here.
Okay.
So that's what I'll need you to monitor. Is that right there?
Okay, on the side there.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's got a lag.
Okay.
It's got a little bit of a lag. So I need to refresh it. Yep, it's just on him right now. That's just Mark right now. It's got like a second or two lag, but should be fine. I'm gonna turn these big lights on. Hey, Lucinda, how's it going? Oh, might turn on more lights. Should I turn on more lights? I think that's fine. Hang on.
It's like-
Look at who I have here. Hey, Mark.
Mm-hmm. I think it's so small. Let me see. How do I make it bigger?
But I can hear you better than in the near meetings.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Gallery. Okay, there you are in gallery. Hi. Oh, I like the hat. Okay.
Oh, thanks. Yeah,
It's suddenly summer here.
Here.
So
Ellensburg Spring. Yeah, it's definitely
Summer.
not summer here.
Are you in your
Yeah.
shirt sleeve, Mark? There is that.
that's right. Yes, yes. But no,
That's great.
it suddenly went from being winter to being summer instantaneously.
Oh.
So.
We did not have such luck here in Ellensburg.
No, but we will want a day like this in 3 months. So
A way to save a keynote file as a PowerPoint.
Oh, is there a way, Mark, to save a keynote file as a PowerPoint? Mark would know that.
Sure.
I know you can save it, probably save it as a PDF.
That would work.
Yeah, but it should be able to export as a
Yeah, is there an export function? Okay, let me see.
Generous Q&A.
Okay.
People to weigh
Let me
in.
try. I'm gonna try to export it.
I don't see any way to save it as a PowerPoint. I don't know.
I don't use Keynote a ton, but let's see, export to PowerPoint.
you might lose a little formatting or a few images. along
Hope
the way, so
not.
Just
We'll
just
see.
check it. And the alternative, as you say, is export to PDF.
The PDF, that would actually preserve your formatting. But do you have any animation on here?
No.
We can do, let's just do both to be fun. Let's just make it. Fun. I want the best quality. Next. I'm just gonna save it on, do you have it on like a thumb drive or something, or
Yeah, it's
it's gonna be on this thumb drive?
Yeah.
So. Lynn, is the stuff on this thumb drive already saved on the desktop?
It's not, we don't need that. We need the export file.
Okay, so I need to take this out
With
first.
our technologies.
Dueling technologies. Lynn knows PCs and I know Macs, and between the two of us, we can figure things out.
That's great.
Oh, I'm just gonna save it on the desktop real quick.
God, I could have just brought a PowerPoint as well.
It's no big deal. We got it. We got this, Glenna. You know what I just discovered with my new computer though, is that my new computer doesn't have a place for one of these.
I have an adapter.
You have an
Mine's
adapter?
like-
I just got my new computer and I was like, my students are asking for some files and I was like,
I get
Oh,
a
yeah,
new
get those for
computer
you.
about every 10 years or 12 years.
yeah, me
And
too.
so, like, oh wait, that's not it. I was just brandishing it. And it seems to be lost.
I love that brandishing.
Where'd it go?
This print is just epic. I know, I was looking at it. I want some time alone to see. Okay,
Yeah.
so
it's
go right
really
here
kind of
and then this goes in. Oh, I can just put this in that?
Just
Okay.
goes-
Okay.
Oh, well, just. do
That goes in there?
And then it's readable on. anything.
Look at that. Look at that. Okay, cool. Lexar. Boom. Boom, export. Here we go. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thinking about it. Yeah.
So the secret is that screen is connected to this one. And so this pointer, it goes over onto the screen behind you.
Oh, yeah, I see that.
So that's what's happening there. So
Okay.
you either need to sort of turn around to look at Adobe or, because we're gonna go full screen when Roger presents. But that's the key there. And then Mark
Okay.
is on CPU 1.
I know, and Mark will be able to see everybody because I'll be on this right here, which is what we're using for the live stream.
Okay.
So am I going to be is somebody going to share a screen for me so I can see the
Yes.
artwork?
Yeah, yeah. Do you have the ability to screen share, Mark?
If you make me co-host, I can screen share, but I mean, but you're going to be, somebody from your computer is going to be the one who's going to share screen. I mean, are the images coming through this same laptop?
It's super complicated.
All right.
They're going to be coming through the old school PC laptop, your old trusty, reliable MCE laptop is where images for both Roger and Glenna are going to come through. And for you, I'm going to have to screen share from the back computer over here. So,
Okay.
yeah.
We'll see. Okay. I just need to see the art somehow. Yeah.
Yes, I know. You're going to be able to see it. You are going to be able to see it.
Okay.
Maybe some more.
How's turnout tonight?
You know, despite the fact that Julian Assange's family is in town, pretty good.
Is everyone here a first year student? I'm assuming.
First year students, anybody?
Thank you all for coming and hopefully we'll be ready in just a minute.
Yeah, we're working out our technology because one of our presenters, our dearly beloved Mark Auslander, is zooming in from the other side of the country. And if you want to bring Mark here, then we should talk to our lovely deans about giving us a little bit more money to fly people in. Just need a few thousand
Right.
extra dollars. So darn, airfare is not cooperating with us right now. All right, I think we're good. I think I can just take this off here. Boom,
Thank you. Someday
boom.
I'll be able to fix any technical problems.
And then I don't need that. Just this. Let's go on here. We're going to screen share from this. Right. Got this on PowerPoint. I'm going to drag it onto the desktop. Nice. And then I'm going to open up this. Open up Zoom. Who's going first? It's Glenna, right? That's what I thought.
Okay, and that'll.
And now screen share. Yeah. How do I make the Zoom come up here?
Oh, so I have it minimized here, so you have to do
Oh,
that.
I have to do that. Okay. And then I need to screen share. There. And then I think, Mark, can you see Glenna's presentation?
Beautifully.
Perfect.
Okay,
So,
Full markup over here.
yes, well, yeah, maybe, I mean, I guess we could. Do we want to have markup right now? Or,
No, it's up to you guys.
yeah, we can, sure.
No, it's more important that everybody get to mainly
So when I
see the art.
Hold on. You gotta work.
Well, I mean, hope you seem to be muted.
Thank you. I want to start by saying that it's such an honor. First of all, on behalf of land, right, and with Emily's deep knowledge here together tonight, and with Mark zooming in. I thought Mark would be larger than life, but Baba's on the screen, but there you are. And all of your expertise, and with Roger, it really incredible, maybe we can say formidable map that traces the path of uranium from the Democratic Republic of Congo all the way across around the globe to the Manhattan site, including Hanford. And so what I saw is that we have a chance to tell a story here where we're specifically look at Hanford site, but we also can really demonstrate and describe the vast global scope of this, the atomic project and its effect on health, lives, environment, around the globe. And that's why I wanted to start with this here in this. There was like an image of the world turned up and down, and I've been really thinking about what this novel is. But my own work of it before, and it's before of this interesting and people keep jumping in and wanting. And in that archive, there's one interview by perhaps the youngest survivor of the Hiroshima bombing, Toshihari, wonderful man who might even be here remotely. I can't but so you know, all together, our work really does bring this this huge sweep across geography, and also across time. When we want to talk about the origins of the time project, there's all of that time, and then if we want to talk about the necessity to figure out the containers question and the cleanup questions, there's just unimaginable amounts of future time that have to be considered. So, there are these two axes, rapid, temporal. And the project that I'm going to talk about is, so it's an art installation that's currently up in Richland, and it's been extended to be up there at Washington State University in Tri-Cities through May. And also it's a book. It was invited in the pandemic to become a book published by Daylight Books at the end of 2021. Got stuck on both interpreted for a while, so did I. And if anyone's interested, I actually have copies with me.
Project and reeled people in bit by bit. So I want to first of all thank Mark Auslander, who wrote a beautiful essay that's included in the book. The book would not be the same without that. And then also the installation, I brought in a friend, brilliant artist based in Portland, Michael Paulus, to help with videography. I had this idea that the installation could have a floor projection, sequencing videos and animations, and I had all these maps, but couldn't do it myself. So it began as this collaborative thing, and he also brought in all of his original ideas and brilliantly stepped in. Also, John Leidecker, also known as Wobbly, musical artist, who helped me take this project that I was trying to create from all of these interviews I began gathering just for my own education, and then realizing that that was where the project lived, in these very different accounts that I was being told. And that became more and more central. So John came in and helped me. I was trying to figure out, well, how can I have all these voices and hours, sitting with people, and that people can enter into a room and hear all these different perspectives. So it was almost like a poem, fragments of things people had said. And John brought it into a surround piece and added his own original work to that. And then everywhere this project lands, it becomes collaborative. So it has some new animations, one with Michael Paulus and one with Philip Mudd, who's teaching at the State University in Richland, where the work is now. And also it holds now an incredible animation made with Gregory Cosmo Hahn, who's also based in Portland. And he took all these maps I'd found of the chemicals that are leaking from the storage tanks at Hanford towards the river, which they're trying to contain. And it's like it's so much of the economy is this cleanup process to try to stop that and figure it out. So Greg created this animation of, taking all these maps and really showing like these plumes both expanding and also in some cases contracting as they're trying to clean it up and stop that. And also the installation now holds a poem by Kathleen Flanagan, and I bet some of you might know her work. An extraordinary poet from Richland, was the poet laureate of Washington for a while. And she gave permission when I was given her book Plume, which is also about those underground plumes. I just fell in love with her work, and particularly the poem called Plume. And so she gave permission for me to create a ceiling to floor print of that poem that's also in the installation. So when I have this sense that this work is not just mine, it really belongs to everyone who participated. And that includes everyone who I interviewed, and everyone who also was photographed for one series that's in the installation called the Hanford or the Atomic Necklace, that is a composite it's a string of photographs of people's scars from a certain kind of cancer that's very prevalent in the Hanford area. So all of this, it's a long intro that tries to give a little sketch, and I hope some of you might get over if you're in the area and visit the installation. But I wanted to also just, explain, why am I doing this work? I'm not from this area. I feel very humble speaking with people. I'm sure many of you here know more than I do about these histories. And for me, my interest began right when I moved to the Northwest, which was in 1984. I'd moved out to Portland to go to college, and I was driving home that summer to New York City with scientist friends, and I learned from them, reading road atlases and talking about Hanford, and that this site was right by the Columbia. We were driving east on 84, and that this site there were 9 nuclear reactors that had been built there, beginning with the first to scale reactor that was built, to create the atomic bomb, specifically that it had created the plutonium for the Trinity test, and for the second bomb dropped on Japan, the Nagasaki bomb dropped on August 9th, 1945. And of course, you all, I think most of you know this. It's been really interesting speaking to different audiences and realizing that many people don't know about Hanford. So if anyone here doesn't know as much, that's so often. I usually do a show of hands, and today we're really strapped for time, so I'm trying to condense this down. Yeah, it at the time, what was really incredible to me was that I didn't know this. I was a history buff back then, and I didn't realize that I was living downstream from this site. And then as I talked with people, it was really interesting to see that many other people didn't know about the site. And this was the pre-Chernobyl era. Chernobyl was about to happen. So also there was a lot of information that was not yet classified that through public pressure was then released. People didn't know about things like the Green Run, which people might know about. And so it was this time where there was this hush-hush secrecy. But that secrecy, it's been really interesting talking about this, not just with art audiences, but with students. And that history, it's like, as I looked at it longer and spoke with more people and learned more, I began to see it as a secrecy that was almost like ingrained into the DNA of the culture, inscribed. along with a lot of loss. And I saw what I saw as denial, and I don't even think that's an accurate term anymore. But, you know, about the magnitude of what's there, that I was looking at it thinking, how can people live right next to this, you know, and trying to understand it. So I think in my book, I described it as a double helix of loss and denial, which was how it looked to me. And that's sort of morphed. It's all sort of changing as it goes. So, okay, so let me show some images. I'm so sorry. I'm talking. Uh-oh. Where did the images go? Can you help me? I don't know. I didn't hit any keys, but suddenly my images are
Oh, it just popped up. I wanted to do
gone,
this instead.
and I'm not familiar with this computer, and I'm a dummy with this.
There you go.
Yeah.
what you want to
do? I see. Okay, good.
It's behind
good.
you. Do you see
Yeah.
that?
So
Yeah.
I wanted to project this image and show the Columbia River to for all of that, actually, that this was, you know, this is from an overlook right by Hanford that people might be familiar with of the river, which I'd fallen in love with. So when I learned that that I was living downstream, I was really just taken aback. I couldn't believe it. And as the more that I looked at these landscapes, I was fascinated by the secrecy that I was encountering, the culture of silence and reserve around a lot of, I was speaking with also a lot of elderly people, some of them have passed away, who really had that deeply, and they would laugh about it as they shared their accounts. But I was fascinated by the contradiction. So this is a triptych that's taken along the White Bluffs of Hanford Reach, a zone that had been, this landscape had been sacred to people, to my understanding, for many thousands of years. It's been interesting to watch the archaeological record be dated further and further back as archaeologists realize that, yes, people were actually there much longer. And there were all these sacred sites. And then you're looking across the Columbia here, this free-flowing stretch of the Columbia into the Hanford region, where you can see there just the remains of one reactor in the distance, barely. And so at the same time, you know, this was sacred ground, and then it was taken out of access and set aside as this nuclear buffer zone for Hanford for 4 decades, and then declared a national monument and a wildlife reserve, which it is. There are eagles nesting, the salmon come up, you know, it's this incredibly beautiful place where I would constantly go and walk while doing this work. But the contradictions there are just really, really incredible, because across the river, you have, you know, one working reactor, that's the Columbia generating plant, pieced together with a drone that was watching me, and the sold loading area. And, you know, you had these different stages of entombed reactors, you know, processing plants and places being taken apart. And then also the Columbia generator plant still working. And a museum, the B reactor museum, which I didn't bring in an image of, but so it was just incongruous and fascinating. And as I was documenting this place, and you know, right below those reactors, the salmon are coming up the river and going back down. You know, it's this cycle that literally does sustain the whole environment. I was photographing these landscapes, and I realized now that as I was
Glenna,
looking at them, I was representing through my photographic work the way that the stories I was being told by people were feeling and sounding to me, which was that there was a lot of contentiousness. There were really different points of view, and it was hard to hold them all at once. And so that's when, you know, in really consciously registering that is when I started to realize I had to make this sound piece in which voices that didn't necessarily listen to one another often or always peaceably could be held in one room. And as the era of Trump being elected and a lot of polarization politically happening in the country, I started to feel like that was also became more important. And I really felt like, well, how can we hold these very different narratives together? So this might be time already. Is that true? So there's a little taste of that work, and let me pass it over to Roger.
Glenna, can you hear me? Glenna, can you hear me? Oh.
Right, let's see if we can transfer to my pile of images here, which I think is this.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep, okay, and so then I have to somehow full screen it. Is there a way to get the cursor over here? I've done it. Is it window
I think it's
or view?
view.
View. This is like doing surgery with a robot.
Yeah, there we go.
All right, there it is. Down, up.
Let me share that screen.
Let's see it really quick.
Oh, that's right. We're over here, aren't we, friends? Okay, come back over here. There we go. Yeah, we want to share screen too. Okay.
Okay, go. Okay, well, thank you, Glenna. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you all to share this project that I've been working on, of which Hanford is a part. And so the thing that I've been working on is basically, it's this first image here, and it's also on the wall behind you there. You can get a closer look at the end of the talk tonight. So this is a block print map. So a block print, it's like carved in linoleum. And it's a map of the route taken by the uranium that was used to power to develop the first atomic weapons, basically to power the research and the development and the explosions of the early Manhattan Project, and continue to be the main source of America's uranium supply until like the early 60s. And that all came from this mine, single mine in what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo, called Shinkolobe, is the word there. And this was a mine that, like a lot of most uranium mines around the world, sort of struggle to produce like 0.3% concentration of uranium. But this mine in DR Congo, the ore from there is assayed sometimes up to 65%. And it's that insane purity that made it possible for a lot of the extremely accelerated activity of research and development into the first atomic weapons possible. And let's go. Oh wait, I'm on the wrong thing. Where is my thing going over there? Yes, no. How into interface? I probably go over here. Yes.
Yes.
And then I go over here and yes, no.
You wanting to see?
I'm trying to page down the PDF.
It may be because it's in full screen. We need a page down. So let's hit escape.
No, I think it's because the cursor is trying to interact with the Zoom.
Oh, why? Cursor?
And because we're screen sharing, maybe.
Maybe let's stop share.
Yeah.
And we'll go back to it in a second.
Let's try it now.
Escape it.
No, it's still not.
Go out of the thing here. Oh,
there we go.
That
Great.
was the thing that we needed to do.
What was that?
It was this thing right here. That maybe it was you. It was your fingers.
Okay.
Your
Well,
fingers did that.
my magic fingers have made it work now. So
I'm gonna mosey back over here. Hold on. We'll screen share again. Go back here. You know, technology is super fun, y'all. We found out we can do so much,
that makes it.
but it means we can't do very much.
That makes it not work. That's the.
That makes it not work?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe we stop screen share and then we page down
Let's just stop screen share.
and then page down.
Which will.
Yeah, now page down.
No. Now we need to here, click, and then, yes, great.
Now we'll screen share again.
No, the screen share is the thing that's making it not work. I'm pretty sure. So we're just gonna go through here. So briefly, why am I talking about this subject? This is the cover of a book that is written about my father, who faked his death in a scuba diving accident to go AWOL from the British Air Force and fly helicopters for the CIA's efforts to maintain American control over Congolese mineral resources in the 60s. That's a long story in one sentence. So basically what I'm going to talk about in relation to this map is the fact that trying to condense this presentation into 15 minutes. Because the uranium from Shinkolobe was so concentrated and so powerful, it is possible to trace its presence in the landscape still in a lot of sites around the world. And basically the mine was developed by the colonial Belgian regime in the early 20s, and was originally just being mined for radium, and because there was no market for uranium, and uranium was just kind of a waste rock that piled up next to the radium mine. And when in the 30s, when people sort of started to figure out the possibilities of generating atomic power, there started to be this interest in uranium, and all eyes suddenly turned towards the single mine in Congo, which was the source of like 95% of the world's uranium at the time. And then war started, and America decided that it needed to start developing nuclear weapons. And so the uranium from this mine, basically all the waste rock that had been piling up around the mine, was shipped to the United States, and the Manhattan Project acquired it and funneled it into this massive infrastructural development that had kicked off to begin all of these complicated and totally novel processes in order to generate the kind of material that it would need to first figure out what was going on down there in the uranium atom, and then figure out how to make it blow up. So here's a picture of the radium mine of Shinkolobe in Katanga. These are like early pictures from, I don't know when these are from, probably from the 20s or 30s maybe. Just a couple of pictures from some Belgian texts. I don't really know the provenance of these. I found them on the internet. So these are just some images from the body of the map. So the uranium in this map, the passage of the uranium is like marked by the arrows, and the presence of it in the landscape is marked by its depiction as these. Well, I can't point. I'm pointing at nothing here, but you can see these black sort of icons of black barrels. And in the research that I did to like trace the passage of this ore through history, the fact that it was transported out of Congo in these barrels stamped product of Belgian Congo keeps showing up in all of these different places. So everywhere the ore goes, it shows up in these barrels marked product of Belgian Congo. It's really kind of uncanny. It's like a character just appearing repeatedly in the historical record. There's the barrels again. Like the Nazis invade Belgium, and they find on the docks 1,200 barrels full of Congolese uranium, which they try to make into their own nuclear project, which didn't pan out for them. What now? Did I do something? What did I do? Nuts. Oh, it has zoomed itself again. Go back over here. Yes. Okay. Zoom just tries to usurp the Adobe Acrobat, but we will defeat Zoom. So basically, I'll just try to go quickly through the various places that the uranium went on route from this mine in Congo towards its ultimate destination. And so like it arrives in the US, and it's in this warehouse in Staten Island. It goes to it goes to this plant in New Jersey where it's ground into a powder. And then it goes to this glass factory in upstate New York, where previous to the discovery of the sort of inherent dangerousness of uranium, the only industrial use that it had was to apply a kind of yellow color to glass, and you can still get uranium glass. You can actually just order it off the internet, get it on eBay. And so the Manhattan Project repurposed this glass factory to process the uranium into certain kinds of oxides and other sort of
nobody can see the which is
isotopes, some forms. I'm misspeaking about exactly what they did with it, but the different kinds of uranium. It was like uranium oxide, uranium salts, and other kinds of crystals, etc., that were then sent on from there for further processing later to one of the next sites. This is a picture of
It shouldn't be a problem at all.
from a news story about the nearness of the uranium plant in New Jersey to this high school in New Jersey. This is the map of upstate New York where the
So I need
glass
to- I
factory
need
is.
to be able to speak.
And then so it continues on from there to St. Louis, where it is processed at the Mallinckrodt facility, which is one of the most
So maybe there's a way to go.
site of
through
like some of the most
or at least
heinous stories of nuclear contamination in North America. I won't go into too much detail about that. But then from there, like in Mallinckrodt, the uranium that's coming from Linde Air is processed into pure uranium metal, which then continues on to two different facilities, Oak Ridge in Tennessee and Hanford in Washington State. And Oak Ridge, it's being turned into uranium-235. And in Hanford, it's being processed into plutonium. This is the Chicago pile where the first, some of the first nuclear experiments in enrichment were done. This is the Mallinckrodt facility in St. Louis. And here are some of the apocalyptic piles of barrels of extremely high-level radioactive waste that were buried illegally outside of St. Louis after there was no longer an industrial need for the products of Mallinckrodt. But factory went out of business, and the next owner took all the barrels of high-level radioactive waste to the municipal dump and buried it at night.
Okay, but it's gonna be,
Oh,
but I can't speak to.
yeah, so it's too bad nobody on Zoom can see the art. Yes, unfortunately.
You can send me.
I don't know how to simultaneously control the slideshow. Could point this up. Anyway, this is just an image of Oak Ridge. We can skip over that because we're most interested in Hanford. So the ore from Shinkolobe arrives at Hanford and is processed in the world's first like industrial scale enrichment reactor, the B reactor, into an enriched form of uranium, which is then processed in the T plant into plutonium. And the uranium that is coming from Shinkolobe, it's referred to as like the waste that is coming from the Shinkolobe uranium is referred to as K65 waste because of the 65% purity of the uranium. So all of these sites that I'm showing here, the site in New Jersey, the site in upstate New York, and the site outside of St. Louis. These are all sites of what is referred to as K65 contamination because it is you can sort of tell from the radioactive quality of the waste that is there. The root of it, or at least the root of the earliest layers of it, is this material from Congo. I'm sorry for the Zoom audience. And here is the tank, one of the early tank farms at Hanford, where some of the earliest waste from the processing there, from processing of the Congolese uranium there ended up. Initially in the panicked rush of the very beginning of the weapons making process, a lot of the waste material was just sort of hosed out onto the ground. And eventually people decided it was probably better to try to contain it. And these were these sort of double walled in the ground tanks where efforts were made to contain some of the worst of the radioactive sludge. A lot of reverb on the audio. I don't know. Is that me touching things? Probably. Anyway, so how am I doing on time here? Let me know.
You're pretty good. You're good.
Okay, great. So basically the uranium continues on from Hanford to the next stage, which is in Los Alamos, where the Los Alamos, the plutonium that was generated at Hanford was used in the experiments that were like the next stage of the development of the atomic weapons. And here's just an image I found on the internet of people manipulating models of plutonium spheres in a lab in Los Alamos. And then the eventual construction of the Trinity device, which was the first nuclear weapon to explode on the planet. And this is sort of depicted in the map here as this in this sort of my version of this image of the very sort of first seconds of the Trinity test, where this very strange fireball with legs has been documented. And so this is the moment when the power of what the mine at Shinkolobe made possible was revealed to everyone all at once. And the thing that everybody had sort of been working to, this desire to acquire this infinite source of destructive power in order to be able to deny it to other hostiles, to people who were perceived as enemies, who were also assumed to be in pursuit of the same kind of power, was suddenly unleashed in a manner that nobody really knew at the time when they were watching this test what to expect. And when they got it, what they got, it was the thing that revealed to them that suddenly, in Oppenheimer's words, that they had sort of become death, destroyer of worlds. So this is an image of the first microseconds of the Trinity test. And so that from there, at least from the nuclear material that was coming from Shinkolobe was fashioned into these first two nuclear weapons, which were taken into the Pacific to the island of Tinian, from which left these two bombers in relatively quick succession to detonate these weapons over the islands of Japan at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So one thing about the use of this Congolese uranium in the Manhattan Project was that it was kept secret, like rigorously secret, and like all sort of public mention of the usage and like presence of this uranium was removed from public record. And if you tried to search for like historical references to the mine or the name of the mine or the use of this material in historical record, it's very difficult to find anything. This is one of the only like newspaper references to Shinkolobe that I've been able to find in years of looking, and it's like a tiny little paragraph above an advertisement for a butcher shop in a Marin County newspaper from 1953. Extremely random and weird. And this is the fact. Half of the known uranium lies in the Belgian Congo and the famous open pit mine. Fantastic open pit mine of Shinkolobe. The mine's name was dropped from maps for secrecy's sake during World War II, because during World War II, the United States had the early version of the CIA, the OSS, was where it was sort of starting to do a lot of the cutting of its teeth and figuring out how exactly it was going to run itself as a secret service. And its first task there was trying to deny access to Shinkolobe's uranium to the Nazis. One other fascinating aspect of the presence of Shinkolobe in popular culture is as its inspiration for the famous Marvel character Black Panther. Stan Lee and Jack Kirby in the 60s, I can't remember exactly the date, in the 60s developed this character who was an African king whose kingdom was powered by this basically sitting atop this pile of magic rocks. And Stan Lee and Jack Kirby had sort of imagined an African kingdom in which the mineral resources that the kingdom had access to and was sited on top of were exploited and used in the service of the society that actually lived next to them, as opposed to being co-opted and taken by foreign entities for the purposes of developing these massive destructive capabilities. And it's a really fascinating narrative to see this character, of this mythical African king who was able to deny access to this destructive element to foreigners and instead use it for peaceful development of utilitarian structures for his own society. And then, of course, there is the hilarious aspect that in this movie, the CIA is portrayed as the good guy. So here's the location of Shinkolobe on the map of Democratic Republic of Congo, and it's down there in the southeast, close to the city of Lubumbashi, and also close to the site of the murder of Congo's first democratically elected president, Patrice Lumumba. That's the mine site in red, death site yellow there. And this is the city of Lubumbashi, and I will be flying to Lubumbashi in about 2 weeks to take this map there and hopefully engage in some cultural exchange, scientific exchange with some scientists and artists at the University of Lubumbashi. And this is further zooming in to the mine site. It's amazing what you can do with Google Maps. You can get a really close-up view of the now abandoned site, which has been abandoned for many years, although it has been sort of independently exploited by people who are artisanally searching for cobalt and copper. All the uranium has been dug out and taken away, but there's still a great mineral richness to the area that people are exploiting by hand with picks. And so that's basically my little presentation about that. Is that good? So if you have a phone and you want to take a picture of that, these are some great books you can check out that have a lot more detailed history of this subject than I've gone into today. And I think that is all I have. Hopefully that didn't go over too much.
I don't know about other shots.
Yeah. Good. Great. We'll just trade out.
They're still taking pictures.
Oh, taking pictures now.
Yeah, they're still taking pictures of your resources.
Good. Everybody get it?
I just want to take this out, if you don't mind. Just real quick down here. I might just do a thing that they don't like you to do on computers. All right, I'm going to stop share.
Oh, do you want to get in there?
Oh, no, it's already stopped share. No, you should sit here.
Okay. All right. And you're monitoring the chat, right? I'm gonna click while you're, okay. All right, hello, everybody. I don't have any images, so for those of you that are still taking pictures of his resources, Roger's resources up there, you can proceed. I really wanted to approach this like a book review discussion. I love book clubs, but I'm not in one. So that's the approach I wanted to take on this. Like, let's have a conversation about what we've seen, what I've seen, kind of base that in some of the traditional knowledge, which was what was requested, that I kind of give that viewpoint. And then, you know, see where it goes from there. So I wanted to really start by just sharing how we're taught as Native children to view the resources and essentially the ecosystem around us, right? They don't use those big words to us, but I wanted to kind of really hone in on the things that were brought in with images. By sharing, you know, how we're taught as Native children that we have a connection to the resources, and this is shared through food. So some of my earliest memories are sitting at a ceremonial table and watching food come down in very specific order. And this relates specifically to the Yakima creation story. So the meal begins with water, and then comes the salmon, the deer, elk, the roots, and then the berries. And the meal is also, again, completed with water. And I remember this, you know, you're sitting there at the table, and I think my chin was like barely above it. And we're hearing all these elements and aspects. And then they look at us children like, this is one of my earliest memories. And they're like, and now you are responsible for speaking for all of these foods that are before you. And I remember the differences that I would see in pop culture or like different Brady Bunch or different shows I'd watch. I was like, why don't they talk to their kids about that? They just talk about homework and, friends. I was like, why are we learning treaty rights and things about the environment or environmental issues that are going on, or how the salmon run is on the Columbia River, which we call in Chihuahua. And I've thought about that, and I've carried that, and I continue to think back to that when I guess the going gets tough, right? We all have moments in those when we speak about any topic that's very long, such as cleanup that stretches to 3033. Right? You look at these plans and you see these people talk about technical documents, and it's like, and then in 3033, I was like, 3033, that's the planning we have right now for Hanford. And one of our elders, Russell Jim Kia, was very instrumental for the Acme Nation's part in being able to speak and continue to speak about the resources that are in this area. Because there was at one time a proposal to make this a bigger and larger radioactive storage, right? Like, it's already kind of the way it is. Let's just dump more. And he was like, wait a second, hold on. He went and made it happen so that he could go to Washington, D.C. and speak to people about the importance of this and the importance of having Native voice. And to say all that and to be able to review his work, he was somebody that was also very inclusive of youth in that messaging. So when I was 20 years old, I was getting ready to go intern in the governor's office, and we were at a powwow, and I was sharing the news. This was before social media, so the news that you shared was phone or in person, and that's how I was talking to him about it. And I was like, hey, I'm gonna go do this internship in the governor's office, and it's gonna be focused on education. And he looked at me and he got very serious. He's like, I want you to carry this message with you. I was like, okay. And he was like, vitrification is not a proven process. And I mean, the scene is there's grass, people are just in regalia, there's loud powwow music around, people are eating like lots of yummy food. And this, I didn't really have Google at that point. I mean, there might have been like a general search bar, but I was like, what is he talking about? What is this term? And so I had to repeat it to myself over and over again. And he's like, if you get the opportunity, I want you to speak on this. And this is the position of the Acme Nation. And I thought, well, this is really serious. And had I not had that basis and had I not had that foundation since I was a youth, that it was my responsibility to speak for the resources, I don't know how I would have carried that message. And the message that continues is we protect the resources for those not yet born. And so it was years later, we were actually driving to the Department of Energy was having a Native American month. So they were like, Russell and Emily, come and speak. And on our way there, it said, I did what you told me to do. I was partially confessing in my mind, because we're getting ready to go into the Department of Energy, and we have to have all these clearances, and they screen you. They don't just screen you when you're going to view the B reactor. They screen, in those areas, but with drones like Glenna had. But they screen you when you're going anywhere near them. And I had said, yeah, I was in a meeting, and they were telling me that I was going to, even though my focus was education, we would get invited to different meetings that the governor had. And then we would have pre-meetings. And in that pre-meeting, I had shared, well, vitrification is not a proven process, and the Acme Nation has a number of questions regarding this. And I was uninvited for that meeting. This is what I was like. I was done. I was not invited to that meeting, Russell. I was like, they walked right past me, because you have to have certain codes, and your card only clears you for certain areas. So I can't just be like, the boss is going to meet me, or I'm going to meet the boss there if I see him going by. Like, I literally had to go with him in order to go to this section and area. And it was a walk by, no eye contact. I was like, oh, are we going to the meeting? He's like, I am. And it was like and in this confession I was giving to Russell, he looked at me and he's like, well, now you're on your way. And I reflect on that often because I think that in society, a lot of times we consider this vocalness, this speaking up. And when you feel like you stumbled or when you failed or you failed, that's a bad thing, right? You can tend to have like a perfectionism about it after that. But his viewpoint and his words continues to show me that being able to speak for the resources for those not yet born is a pathway and a process. And it's one that we believe is intertwined with the resources. We call the salmon and the different resources, the salmon are our brothers. And in fact, when we have our first food ceremony, the translation of that can come across really harsh to people that aren't familiar with what we are talking about. If you were just to walk into that and hear them say, or if you were even to describe it and I was to type it out, you'd be like, what are these people telling these kids? And so when my daughters had their first roots, they stood up before the people, and the food that they had gathered was there, and it was also being served. There was some that was going to be handed out. And before that, in our language, they had said, you are standing before the people because you have taken a life. This little kid's like 4. You have taken a life. This is a serious matter. And now you're going to stand before the people and tell and share how that happened. And this was not only just them standing up there. There was other people that had salmon, a first salmon catch. And when I think about what this means in terms of a larger ecosystem and places along the Columbia River, I think about how that aspect of verifying and making sure that we're utilizing the resources in a way that the community approves of, right? So if there was any misstep taken, that was the time that the community and numerous extended families and friends could help guide and offer further guidance regarding that. And so when I think about these larger, huger scale plans, and I think of these large technical documents, I think in how the application of this community review and this community input could be added. So when Russell, so fast forward on our drive with Russell, I don't know why I've made this a drive with Russell, but you're all in the car now with me. He had shared that as a part of the planning, they needed examples of restoration. So one of the case studies that I had published, it was sponsored by National Science Foundation. It was peer reviewed, it's open source, available on Evergreen's website under their native cases, was talking about the return of the Wapato. And so for those of you that aren't aware, the Yakama Nation restored over 400 acres of wetland and riparian area. So it was an asparagus field. It was historically a wetland. Then it was an asparagus field and wheat field, then primarily wheat. And then the tribe moved to restore it to historical use. And the tribe has more acreage than that, but this is the specific land, the specific timeline was tied to this 400 acres. And so they went to the elders, they tried to ask, like, how did this originally look? They went to the archaeologist, they went to the geomorphologist to align with that. It took me like a month to be able to say geomorphologist. You could type out anything, right? You could whatever, anything, but to write it and fully know and to say what it is. And they worked together to basically lift up Toppenish Creek. Right? What did I say about the ceremony table? What is the first thing that went on there? Water. In order to fix the resources, you always have to be able to have and maintain some control of the water. And so they were just trying to just restore the wetland, but to their surprise, a resource returned after a 70-year absence without seeds and without planting. It remained dormant. And so when we went to the Department of Energy, when we went there, he said, this is the plan that we're putting into Hanford's restoration model. So the Yakama Nation and the work that we've done to restore lands is a part of the restoration model because of our elders and different people that have worked on that project, the biologist, archaeologist, and the elders. It's showing that things are possible, right? Because when you look at Hanford and you look at some of the things and you know about the impacts to people, it can get pretty dire, or it can feel that way, right? I mean, I have family members that don't have thyroids or are on thyroid medications. They're downwinders, I guess, is the approach. Congenital hypothyroidism, which means you're not born with a thyroid. And the reason why I think some of the previous panel members' information is so powerful is that it gives you a visual anchor for some of this information, right? It's not super duper technical, which is easy to be with Hanford. But, and I just wanted to leave you with one final phrase, which is in our language, this is another thing that we say when we view the land and talk about the land. Ichi timini ticha miwana mi. This land is a part of us, part of me, part of you. So. Hi, Mark. Hi, Mark. It's so weird having Mark on the screen because usually he's such a big booming voice. So he's so quiet right now. Yeah. Let's get the booming.
I just need to make sure that I get Mark on here. I may have to go back to the other one to spotlight. Not this. Let's remove this spotlight. Why don't we want the pin on this side here? Maybe if I go all the way over here, we're gonna go. Oh, I know why. Because I'm on the. This is the magic of work 2009. Is this yours or is this the I don't want it to get lost because it's the same color as the people. And I always lose mine. Okay, Mark?
Yes, can people hear me? Hi, can people hear me? I'm hearing a lot of reverberations, so I apologize for that. And I think MC is muted, so.
Right, I'm going to.
What's the other one that's logged in? So your phone or?
Mark?
Yes, should I speak now? I'm going to jump in and hope people can hear me. Please let me know if there's a problem.
Yes. Hold on. Try now.
Oh, okay. I hope this is working. It's wonderful to be to see so many dear friends, and also to meet over Zoom with Roger Peet, whose work I've been honored to display in the past, and it's just gets better and better. So it's thrilling. It's also very meaningful. Hope and I were thrilled at the Museum of Culture and Environment several years ago to host another exhibition of art and poetry and science about Hanford Particles on the Wall, which was sponsored by Washington State Physicians for Social Responsibility. And we too, sort of anticipating what Glenna has done in her wonderful installations, were honored on the very wall that you see in front of you to have Kathleen Flanagan's amazing, brilliant poem, Plume, also a wall of ceiling to floor and in Braille. So it's lots of connections. I wanted to talk in reference to the commentaries we've heard tonight about what we might call the nuclear uncanny. For Freud, of course, the uncanny is that which is both unfamiliar and familiar at the same time, something that is strange and yet we feel in the sense of deja vu that we've been to this place before. And this is particularly dramatic, as we'll see. I think you get a sense in Glenna's work, it's very strange and unusual, and yet we somehow feel like we know it before. And it's something because of the particular ways that radiation, which traverses the visible and the invisible, and defines so many aspects of our contemporary world in ways we never fully understand. And this is part of the power, the uncanniness, that the work of art, which is to show us something, to make visible that which we may have suspected dimly but did not know, which is, of course, the genius of Roger's work, now showing these remarkable, tragic, horrific, and yet tantalizing supply chains that span the globe and connect us all. All supply chains are a little bit uncanny because they're rendering visible that which is invisible and back and forth. But that's especially true for these sites of nuclear weapons production, of uranium extraction, of nuclear testing, and as well as, of course, of nuclear battlefields and sites of detonation. And that, I think, comes through both Glenna's art and Roger's art in very powerful ways. This sense wound into this of secrecy and denial, the double helix that's, as Glenna suggests, braided into the life of the Hanford site in the Tri-Cities, very unusual world. And this is compounded, I think, especially in Roger's work. I'd love to hear you talk more about this, Roger, by the sort of uncanniness. I mean, for Freud, the ultimate Oedipal relations are very strange relations with our parents, which we never fully resolve. We're at the heart of all uncanniness. So the nuclear uncanny often has a lot to do with parental figures and what we've done to Mother Earth and so forth. In Roger's case, this is especially dramatic because the shadowy figure of his own father, who faked his own death to be reborn in order to, in the interest of American intelligence, manage the complex covert supply chains of strategic minerals during the Cold War. I will mention that I have my own weird nuclear uncanny saga, with a bit of Oedipal dynamics too. My stepfather, the physicist Maurice Shapiro, no longer with us, was a project leader on the Manhattan Project, and actually wrote, Roger, you may have seen this, the first major scientific account of the Trinity test, where he described many of the strange, in the attempt at a technical language, as Emily says, to characterize the almost mystical dimensions of this moment. But I also come to this having, as an anthropologist, having done research in Central Africa for a long time. And while I haven't been to where Roger's going, close perhaps to the Okatanga Shinkolobe site, I have done fieldwork fairly close to it. So knew a number of Zawa, of Congolese folks who shared many stories about Shinkolobe, which are centered, and Roger, as you may know, on the mystical figure of Mama Kipesa, who is a sort of transformation of the goddess Mamiwata, who we encounter all over Central Africa. And she's beautiful and seductive, but extremely dangerous. So the old story that Congolese miners told, I mean, going back many, many decades, is that Belgian colonial engineers, mining engineers, had contracted kind of a political and economic and sexual relationship with Mama Kipesa, with the spirit of the mine, this irradiating spirit of the mine that allowed them, because they evidently had sex with her, to sort of marry her, and that allowed them access to the mine. But she extracts terrible costs for this. This is a constant theme around the world in mines, that mines often have spirits that are both alluring and dangerous. And so that for many generations of African men, male miners, both during the formal period of the mine and then more recently for artisanal mining, as Roger mentioned, that they will be given dreams by Mama Kipesa that will take them into the mines, open up new potential seams of rare earth minerals. But there's a terrible cost. If you don't properly sacrifice to her, she can collapse the mine on you, the chambers and the tunnels and so forth. and this is, I think, what's so marvelous about Roger's art is that he takes us into this kind of mystical universe that we all live in one way or another, which is compounded by the very strange labor relations that always run through nuclear production scenarios and nuclear supply chains. Because nuclear energy and nuclear weapons production depends on what the scholar Bo Jacobs has called nuclear subalterns. That is to say, the frontline people, either in the extraction of uranium, the processing, for example, of plutonium, producing these, 650 or so daughter isotopes, the production of nuclear weapons, the testing and so forth. It's always the quote wretched of the earth. It's the most impoverished people on the planet often. My wife Ellen and I have worked along the Savannah River plant, which is a kind of companion site in South Carolina to Hanford for the production of plutonium. And there again, it's very often low-income African Americans that are in the front lines, deprived of the dosimeters, of the radiation protection gear and so forth. So this happens everywhere in China and Kazakhstan, in Australia and so forth around the world. And I think that's part of the key thing about the horror and the drama of Shinkolobe. I think you'll find when you're there, because there are these long narratives of quasi-slave-like labor, the extraction of all precious minerals in Congo are dangerous, but especially radioactive ones. So they were sort of, the labor regime set up by King Leopold, although it was officially supplanted when the Belgian Congo came into power, it never really ended. And when post 1940, the period that Roger mentioned, we get this really fascinating attempt by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, assisted by the OSS, the forerunner of the CIA, to reopen the mine and extract still more a very high quality uranium. The stories, at least that we've heard from Congolese folks, is that a quasi-slave labor regime was reinstituted. And that needs to be historically confirmed, but that's at least the local sense. So that this mystical figure of Mama Cabeza, this apparition, which, as it were, resurfaces through the global unconscious every time we deal with nuclear weapons. This sense that there is an almost fiendish, mystical, satanic force that is both life-giving and extraordinarily destructive. That is also the congealed labor really of centuries of people of African descent. Mami Wata herself, who's the inspiration for Mama Cabeza, emerged, it is thought, on the, was inspired by the figureheads on the prows of slave ships, and now has been transformed across the generations into this other form. So I just want to suggest that throw out this idea of the nuclear uncanny, and it's so relevant to what Emily talks about, because when Russell Jim, who shared so much of his wisdom with us over the years, would talk about this theme of responsibility to future generations, both to the ancestors before us and those who would come after, in terms of safeguarding the resources of the Reach, that what was being undercut in terms of that positive chain of life-giving transition from water to salmon to elk to deer back to roots and berries and water, all those things that Emily was characterizing were being undercut by nuclear radiation, precisely because of the anger he and other teachers emphasized that was associated with nuclear weapons production and the potential of their use. So this is a story about positive resources, about positive mutuality and caring, and the undercutting of that through the massive extraction and transformation of nuclear material for the purpose of terror and hatred. So that leaves a kind of shadow and a residue. And it seems to me that is the enormously important work of the artist who can bring to light that which we may have dimly suspected, but brings the uncanny back into a level of consciousness, which is what Glenna's remarkable photography does, and the soundscapes that you'll hear in the installation, and that Roger does in these really stunning prints that make us re-see the globe, a world that we think we know, but which underneath it has all of these forces of extraction, of transformation, of secrecy, including that by his own father, that make the modern world, the world that we know and yet don't fully know. So that's this idea of the uncanny is what I'm throwing out, and I wonder if Roger or the artists or the other artist, Glenna or Emily, if there's anything here that you might find of use.
Okay, Mark. So in order to engage in that conversation and have everyone respond, this is how we have to do it. I had to mute Mark, and now Mark can hear us, right? Just fine. He's nodding his head. So this is how we're going to do things in 2023, friends, when we have 2009 technology. Yeah, that's right. You know, did you all have anything to say? No pressure. Yeah.
I can't directly respond because there's one thing that there's something that I realized that probably one of the most important parts of the story is, as Mark says,
That way Mark can see you. Oh, there.
Great. Is the fact that the people who did the work of digging the Shinkolobe ore out of the ground are completely absent from the historical record. Like there are several books that I found about sort of the history of mine workers in the Congo who had a pretty extensive like a history of labor organizing and trying to defend their, the rights of their own labor in the face of like pretty brutal exploitation by the Belgians and the Americans. But the people who dug the ore out of the mine at Shinkolobe are just like not present. They are just like unremarked. And I've been working with this community of expatriate Congolese people in South Africa who are migrant workers, the descendants of migrant workers, people who left the mines in Congo to go work in the mines in South Africa because you can get a better wage in the mines in South Africa. And so there's this expatriate Congolese community in South Africa, and these two guys who have formed this organization called Congolese Civil Society of South Africa, which puts on an event every year called the Missing Link, in which they try to connect, they try to bring people together and connect add Shinkolobe to the history of the way people understand nuclear history and nuclear weapons and the sort of like the legacy of like nuclearity in the West and in the world. And they've done it every year for the last 6 years, and they describe a lot of the similar effects on members of their community that Emily was describing, similar problems with thyroid cancers, like lack of thyroid, people with hypertrophy of the thyroid. And so it's the conditions that people experience, here in Eastern Washington and in Japan as like a consequence of the radioactivity there are the same things that people who are, have survived the presence of this kind of nuclear activity in Congo are like, it's the same experience people are having all over the world. And the secrecy about the labor that those people did is like one of the most glaring omissions in the history of this entire narrative, because there's been documentation and some kind of public attention brought to almost every other party in the story, including the miners on the Navajo and Hopi reservations in Arizona and New Mexico, who did a lot of the mining of whatever American United States uranium was used in the Manhattan Project. The people from those communities have been sort of acknowledged by history and have been offered some compensation by the US government. But the role of the Congolese miners who produced this uranium that made this world-shattering discovery and implementation of like these apocalyptic tools they've never been acknowledged, and they're just like, they are absent from the historical record entirely. So that was something I should have made clear.
Can I throw one thing
Yes.
into that about Hanford, although I want Emily to also, take it too, but quickly. I just want to relate that to what I realized as I was looking at Hanford. That, and I put it often when talking about this, as artists are used to looking at negative spaces, the spaces in between things, people, objects. I felt like I started looking for the negative spaces between the stories that I was being told, the narratives, and realizing there were all these perspectives that were missing, and thinking about all the people that had worked in the fields. I was lucky to interview a Cesar Chavez organizer who had really studied that and dug up the statistics and the, reports about fatalities amongst workers in the fields. But there were all these people who were not officially, they were from Mexico, or they were Mexican American, but migrating through, and they're just never in the numbers. And then I was realizing there were all these waves of people that moved up at different eras from the South who were Black, and African Americans were given the worst jobs at Hanford. And the book holds two accounts, one very pro-nuclear person, and one very critical. They're both friends, but they made me aware that there were these vast populations that were not counted, and as well as Native people, right, that were right there and were fishing in the river, even after the site had been closed off and was very dangerous. They were still fishing there. And maybe, I don't know, you want to add to that, but there's such parallels.
Yeah, I'm gonna pivot a little bit. And Mark loves it when I do this. So I just keep him on his toes academically. I want to hear what 3-syllable words you're gonna use. No. For those of you that have been near the B reactor and on that stretch of the Columbia River, and I appreciate the images that were shared about that, there are so many different development projects that have been on the river. It's hard to tell what the Columbia River originally looked like. And it's so interesting, dynamic, that the stretch of Columbia River that has been undammed and looks historically how it has is this stretch of the river near the B reactor. So if we want to look at how the river historically looked, that's the place we go, with this huge B reactor right there. It, you get the sense of it, but at the same time, you get the sense of the history and context of everything that's happened along there. But for restoration planning purposes, for people that have interacted with the river, for people that want to see at least that stretch of the river with like no peripheral vision, I was able to go with one of our Yakima elders in the boat when we went there, and that's where her father lived. That's where their village was at. And she's like, he was removed out of here when they wanted to put that up. And there was a sense of loss there. He was removed from his home. He was displaced. So that's kind of my comment about that broader question.
Yeah.
So Mark, if you want to respond, I'm going to mute this, or one of y'all can.
Great. Yeah, thanks. That's very helpful, everyone. I think in terms of Emily and Roger's question about, and Glenna's too, about how do we reclaim the historical archives? How do we listen to the stories of the land and the river that are often been obscured, especially by the giant development apparatus in the Tri-Cities? And even how do we hear the voices of those miners who are officially excluded from the historical record? And there are ways. I mean, I think the kinds of storytelling that Russell, Jim, and so many others, so many of Emily's teachers have engaged with across the years, whether or not they're stories about beaver or lamprey and so forth, those are deep and subtle and complex sacred stories about place and knowledge and wisdom. And similarly, I think, Roger, I hope you'll find that as you re-examine the archives, that the mythological story of Madame Capesa, Madame Capesa, this extraordinary being, that is can be understood as a kind of distillation of the stories of really generations of those unacknowledged miners, many of whom suffered, as far as we can tell, from different radiation sicknesses across the years, because they're telling a story of someone who promises to wed you. You might have left your own family, left your own village in Chaba or even further in order to work in the mine. You're promised the possibility of marrying her, and yet and of having sex with her, and yet she drains the very life force out of you. She comes to you in dreams always. It was always said. And these are dreams of power and wealth that speak so much to the historical experience of miners who've been pulled out of agricultural and other life ways to work in the mines. And yet these very dreams can trap you and eat your life away. So these are sacred stories, really, that are the kind of distillation. And I imagine that as you work collaboratively with local artists and storytellers and community members, including miners themselves, who have moved back and forth across the African subcontinent, different kinds of mining contexts, that those stories will, I think what's already happening in your work are allowing you to rediscover in archives, but a different kind of archives, so that through the work of photography and soundscapes and Glenna's work and your work as a printmaker, the kind of work that Emily and her kin have been doing for since time immemorial, of telling us sacred stories that allow listeners to and young to engage in a kind of time travel between past and future. That kind of more expanded archives is an enormous gift in the midst of so much suffering and travel. Were there questions from the audience? I'm eager to hear, especially if the students have anything to say, although it's late.
All right, are there questions? Any more questions?
I'll make just one comment.
Yeah.
That first building you showed along the river there, long thin one. My father worked there.
Oh, yeah. The tea plant.
Yeah,
Yeah, a really weird building.
yeah, it is a good.
Yeah, entirely operated remotely, no people inside.
Yeah,
No.
I lived in Kennewick during that period. I was in high school.
Yeah.
And then later in the early 60s, after I finished my PhD, I worked in the labs there. And General Electric ran all the labs before Patel and took over. General Electric retreated, and Patel took over all the labs. I taught math and physics at the high school in Kennewick.
Oh, wow.
Before I became a faculty member here at Center.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm interested. There's a lot that intrigued me about this conversation that I hadn't, as much as I maybe more than your average bear, grappled with Hanford, but hadn't really considered. And one of those was something that I think Emily and Mark said together. And it's this idea of like I think the word you used, Mark, was maybe like the hatefulness that undercuts the resources, and that the resources are their life, right? Like we've been working on this exhibit about food at the museum. We have a whole list of like what food is over here. And we were all brainstorming with our students, what is food? And food is energy, it's medicine, it's, connection, it's love, it's comfort, it's culture, it sustains us, right? But it's life. And I think, Mark, when you kind of brought that home about the whole idea of like, there's a sort of hatefulness that undercuts that, I'm sticking with that. That's something I'm going to be sticking with for the rest of the evening to just kind of chew over, because it kind of makes me think about what we do bring what kinds of feelings and maybe negative space we do bring into these kinds of realities, these complexities. And I don't really have a question in that other than just something that I am just thinking real deeply about. So thank you all for that, I guess. And maybe the question is actually for Glenna, and that is, what's in that negative space, right? Like, what is in that negative space between those conflicting truths?
Yeah, and what I wanted to be very respectful in my work to represent everybody's stories, including people like your father, right? And people who had been brought from all over the country to create this incredible feat in such a short amount of time that they did. I wanted to respect that. And there's one scientist in my collection of archives who says that barely anybody was harmed at Hanford. And he was brilliant, a brilliant person. I wanted to place his opinion, which was formed by his life experience and what he needed to believe, and what he clung to then to sort of preserve, I think, his sense of self and identity, and pride, and his whole life's meaning really was wrapped up in that pride. So I think it was very difficult for him to make space for these other stories of being harmed. And so the last thing I wanted to do was come in and be like, I felt like there was also really good anti-nuclear work that's been done. There's a great installation by Kim Stringfellow about Hanford. It's very informative. I didn't want to do that. I felt like I wanted to create a space where everybody's different life experiences could be. But when put together, I think that there's this collision that's inevitable, as much as there's also harmony, and a lot of really interesting stuff weaving together there. But because a lot of people were also harmed. And I think what's been really fascinating is that everyone, including the people who've helped me install my work, both at the Wanapum Center, at the dam up there at Priest Rapids, and now where it is, so many people have stories of loss. And I sometimes think that some of the anger and even rage or, anger at others, that I wonder what it's really resting within, because there's all this deep loss and fear probably too. I think that one of the scientists I spoke with was, well, actually, I'll wrap this up, but one of the people I spoke with was very high up in the DOE, a wonderful old man. And he was more afraid than anyone I spoke with. And that came through in these like little tears in the conversation, because he was expressing a lot of pride in Hanford. And then at one point, I actually realized he had tears in his eyes. He's passed away. He was terrified more than anyone, because he knew more than most people do about the problems that we're facing with that site. Yeah.
Many years later in my career, I was a White House fellow in DC. Department of Energy, and I managed to travel jointly between DOE, State Department, and CIA. So I had access to a lot of things. Hanford is still is one of the greatest concentrations of radioactive waste in the world. I mean, it's right up at the top. And there's a problem there that hasn't been solved for the last 50 years or 100 years. And it's still there waiting to be solved.
Thank you. And for me, it's the bigger monster behind every other crisis, because climate change is terrifying, whatever you make of what's happening. But every crisis, every fire, we have these nuclear sites that they don't know what to do with this waste. And we're throwing billions of dollars at them. But yeah, it's much bigger than Hanford, to my understanding. Does anyone else want to comment on that or bring in other people? Because I have a feeling there might be other people here that have knowledge of this. Thank you for speaking.
Just the time scale is, I think, what's just really hard to wrap your mind around. And like when you say, like, well, climate change is something we should be really worried about. And the rate at which radioactive material decays, like it's bigger than like what happened to the dinosaurs, you know? I mean, it's that big. It's that, like, it's hard for like a person that's only on this like ephemeral plane for so very short amount of time to comprehend, you know?
And I love it that we have Emily here, because I think that what I was aware of working at Hanford was there's this really old culture, very, very old, with these stories that I'm sure are very varied in different cultures about forgetting that we're in this dynamic, synergistic, to use one of these words, but you know, where there's everything's interrelated, and there's a mutual nurturing. The earth nurtures us when we care for it, and when we forget, we almost get wiped out. So there's some kind of hope in these stories, right? That life is pretty tenacious, and comes back, you know. But
Yeah.
Rematriation, that's another word,
That's the
Mark.
word.
I didn't hear you say that word, Mark. I'm
It's a good
kind of
word.
wondering what happened. But the rematriation is this aspect and dynamic of, you know, going back to Mother Earth and connecting with it. But I also, in sharing that example about Russell, you know, he knew that the work that he was doing, as a lot of people know that work on Hanford, the work's not going to be done by the time you go. It's going to continue, and that can have a lot of emotion with it. That can pack and carry a lot with it, because you can feel yourself on a like, let's go. We got to do as much as we can possible. Even it's like, you know, the dishes before your mother-in-law is coming over or something like that. It's like, we're not going to make it all happen. We're just going to have to do the best we can with the time we got. That's kind of the message there. I don't know why I did that analogy, but my mother-in-law doesn't talk to me about my dishes, but that's just the sense of urgency that comes with this. And also this duality of, well, I'm going to have to make sure enough people know the technical aspects of this work to continue it when I'm gone.
I mean, like what you were saying about the official line being that the cleanup is on track to be completed by 3033. Was that what it was?
I don't know if it's completed. They
Or
have
just like,
plans.
they
I would ask
they
the
have
PhD
plans.
person in our audience specifically that, but the
just
plans extend to 3033.
But just like the
6,000
the
years or
the prospect
something.
of, like, you know, like imagining like the culture that we live in, imagining doing a continuous process of work for the next 1,000 years, when what it took to get us to the point we're at now was like, well, I mean, you could argue about the specifics of like timescales, but basically from the beginning of the Manhattan Project to the detonation of the bombs was 3 years, and there was no consideration in that time at anything other than the process of achieving this total control over like the greatest destructive power that could possibly be imagined. And that was the only thing that was being considered. And we live in the sort of ashes of that impulsive desire to like create something that could destroy the future, destroy the world, destroy everything, destroy like anything that has ever existed, and make it impossible for anything to ever exist again. And the idea that that culture could produce some way to mitigate that effect for the next 1,000 years is really difficult to imagine for me.
Mark, we've had you on mute. Did you want to have any closing remarks? Can you mute?
What am I doing?
Just move to Zoom.
Yeah. Oh, well, absolutely. I think the relationship between these two big words of rematriation and vitrification are enormously important. Right. Vitrification is, right. I mean, untold billions have been poured into it. And I think, as Roger pointed out, precisely because of the compressed timescale of the Manhattan Project, and the fact that early Cold War plutonium production, as we increasingly know, was kind of seat of the pants and experimental. And it's very hard to reconstruct. So that's why these, these enormous, single or double held hold leaking tanks that are this almost intractable, unimaginable science experiment now baking for over 7 decades in the desert sun are so impossible. And this idea that they can sort of simply be transmuted into these ceramic logs through the vitrification is seems to be unsustainable. I mean, from time to time, the corporations that are doing this put this on hold, and as they sort of coyly put it, because of the potential for an unanticipated criticality event, meaning apocalyptic destruction. And yet, the rematriation work goes on, and it is our only source of hope and optimism. I know it's very difficult for many of our students right now, who can give us the critique, whether or not it's global warming or environmental contamination and so forth, can give us the critique, and yet the wisdom teachings that Emily shares with us, these themes of rematriation, of a deep intertwining that is multi-species between human persons and animals and plants and river and land, that is the greatest gift that can potentially guide us towards a truly inclusive and responsible ethic of restoration and repair. It seems very, very daunting, of course, and it does imagine thinking about vast timescales that we're not used to thinking about in our highly accelerated world. But that really, I think, is the critical work of our Indigenous teachers, and also the work of artists who can bring to light these dynamics and create spaces, whether or not it's in poetry or visual art or music and so forth, that allow us to recognize that which we would like to put to rest, that we'd like to turn our eyes away from. And if we can somehow bring that ethical work of art and that ethical work from our Native teachers and partners, that's our one area of hope in this very troubled moment. So that's my thought.
And don't forget to check out the print on the wall if you want to check it out.
Oh, you should take it to the Zoom audience. No.
Oh.
We'll walk it over.
It's all right. Let's do that.
Okay.
Mhm.
You guys would find it.
All right, here's the print.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, you're recording, I'm going to be reading everything in there, but just for record keeping. Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. Okay.
Fantastic.
And so do I have your permission to record? Yeah. That's what's good for. Yeah. Yes, I was just wondering.
There you go.
Roger, can you hear me?
The shortest one's the oldest. I'm taller than my sister.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah, very interesting.
I'm going to put you on. Yes,
The parking lot that, when you drive in on.
this way. Yeah, no problem. Okay, now I'm turning you up now. I can hear you.
Oh, I just wanted to tell Roger something if he can still hear me.
Okay,
but,
hold on. Here's Roger.
uh,
Mark, I want to tell you something. This is
Yeah,
gotta be
so Roger, I mean, your work
Yes.
is so wonderful, and I loved everything you had to say. I have you been to Tinian yet? Because Ellen and I have spent some time there. My wife and I, yeah. And so we were able. So the northern part of the island, which is under U.S. Navy control. The last time we were there, it was possible to visit the famous nuclear bomb bays. You know that they had to dig because the bomb bays couldn't fit. They had to dig at these deep pits, both for Little Boy and Fat Man. It at some point it would really be amazing if you could go there. I mean, Ellen is a scholar of Japan, so we spend time in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but to see the Tinian, and the world of Tinian is amazingly interesting because, you know, it was Spanish, then German, then Japanese colonial space before the Americans took it over. And it was especially in Okinawan Island. So you had all these overlapping histories, and to get to actually see, and it was the busiest airport in the world, you know, in the final 6 months of the war, because once the Marianas were captured, that really put the Japanese home islands in the in range of mass incineration. So to see that place is just amazingly uncanny. And as an artist, I think you'd find it enormously interesting and disturbing, but moving. You know, so I hope there's a way to connect. Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to talk to you more about this entire subject at some point. I mean, I'm going to Congo beginning of May, and it's a little bangy in here right now. But there's no sort of guarantee that I'm going to be able to get to the mine site because, you know, permissions are vague and it's not necessarily clear whom to ask in order to acquire those permissions. But fingers crossed, hopefully I will get to do that. Sorry, it's loud.
Yeah, there was an anthropologist, was it Nick Renier, who got pretty close, I think in 2018, 2019. I think that's the last person I know of. I could try to connect you, but
yeah. I mean, I would make a connection. Like I have a friend who has been there. She is a director of an art space in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. And she gave me some connections, but apparently there's like some cross purposes between the people she has tried to connect me to and some of the other people that I'm trying to connect to. So negotiating those sort of complicated relationships I'm just at the beginning of that process at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there are these accounts in Kenya and Tanzania of customs agents with Geiger counters coming across. You know, every time people claim Shinkolobe is totally mined out of, tapped out of uranium, some stuff shows up in various places around the planet that seems to suggest under very difficult conditions, some artisanal miners are getting something out. So it's always hard to figure out what what exactly is moving around and leaking out. But anyway, it'll be an amazing trip. So I can't wait to hear. I'll ask around too for any contacts in anthropology land that might be able to help out. So,
yeah, any suggestions you got, I would be glad to hear. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, right. Also, the people's sense of humor in that part of the world is really fantastic. It's like in the midst of all this insanity and darkness. So just listen for the jokes. I would say that's often when people who feel they can't tell you something directly, that they'll usually try to find a way to get it across in humor. So I think you'll enjoy that. Yeah.
And I've been to Congo twice before in 2014 and 2012, but it was a completely different context. So, and kind of in like I'm looking forward to going in this time because it is sort of entirely my own sort of like realm of interest. I'm not like really going into somebody else's project, but sort of bringing my own.
Yeah.
Plus, hopefully, the collaboration with these two guys from South Africa, these two Congolese guys from South Africa. Fingers crossed.
And are you in touch with the team at Artist Proof Studio in Joburg, the printmakers there?
I mean, I follow them on Instagram.
Yeah, because they have some interesting Congolese connections, into which might be helpful. Do you know Kim Berman, or I can put you in?
No, yeah, great. I mean, any connection that you want to make is good. I mean, I should message them. I know I have friends a couple of people in Just Seeds, I think, have communicated with
Right.
the people at Joburg Print Studio at least.
Yeah. Okay. But I think I have your email somewhere in there. So
Right.
yeah. So I'll just put you in touch and because through the University of Joburg art school, there just may be some people you may already know, but there might be some other connections there in terms of the printmaking world.
Cool. Yeah, the Joburg that print studio is amazing. They do so much great stuff. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
like books.
Okay, great. I'll let you go.
Well, cheers, Mark. Yeah, let's talk more soon. I'd love to maybe have another brief conversation before I head out.
Anytime, it'd be fantastic. Yeah.
Okay.
Great.
Awesome.
Okay.
Cheers. Nice to meet you.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Pleasure. Okay, is Glenna still there? Is she taken off or?
Yeah. Who are you trying to contact?
Hi, Mark.
Hey there. Hi.
I'm
Good.
just speaking with someone about the book, but
Oh, good.
that was
Okay.
cool. And yeah,
Okay. Well,
thank you.
we'll follow up soon. Okay.
Yes, let's talk. I can call you tomorrow. Okay.
Wonderful. Great.
Should I
Okay.
pass you to
Bye-bye, everybody.
Let's say hi to Emily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Emily. Thank you. Always
I used
a
the biggest
joy.
acronyms tonight first. Is that,
That's
did I
right.
win that? Yeah.
That's
I
right.
won.
Yeah. Russell would
I'm
be
just
Russell would be proud of you. Yes. Russell, of course, loved when he was dealing with techno scientists or even physical anthropologists, blowing them over by how many different languages he could move between.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that was. I felt his spirit was present. But that's great. Anyway, so the kids are. It's nice to see little things online about them. They seem to be.
Yeah, they're spry as ever. They keep us on our toes.
Yeah. So, and no ideas what interests are developing that might.
Well, Alice is in track, and she's said since she's been a little girl, she's gonna be a fashion designer, and she's gonna move to Paris. So that's been consistent.
Good. Okay.
Zora, I think she's gonna take over the world. Like I just know once she's got her wings, she's gonna fly, and
Right.
we'll have to travel wherever she is just to see her. So she's
Okay.
just a real spirit that way. Yeah.
That sounds
And
fantastic.
Jared is very into math. He's 4 points away from being perfect on the math test. So we're
Oh,
kind of
really?
surprised that he can't even read. So it's really interesting how they give math tests to kids, because
Yeah.
how do they read it to that,
Yeah,
so
my, my father's a pure mathematician, who and
I didn't
so
know that.
yeah, so quite at age 92 and a half, he's quite a distinguished and creative, still a very productive mathematician. So and he thinks that kids have the greatest mathematical insights. So the really brilliant things before things like reading get in the way of true insight. So maybe they'll meet sometime. And,
Yeah.
get to,
Yeah.
That's so much fun that he enjoys that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. And JD seems to be doing fine.
Yeah. I think springtime archaeology stuff's kicking up. Even if it's not kicking up, he wants to be out in the field,
Right. Yeah. And he's not teaching this quarter, is he? Or
Yes, he's
Oh, he is.
teaching. The course, I think, was last taught by Candy. So he's teaching the thirds in the series.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he started with like prehistory, then the next stage of history, then the current contemporaries this quarter.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Okay.
I probably butchered the names of the classes, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I know the sequence. Yeah. Because Myrna's in the neighborhood here. She teaches just around the corner from us, actually.
Oh, okay.
If you remember Myrna. So she's
Yeah, just a little bit. Yeah.
Who was sort of coordinating the program for a while. So she's working a lot on the New England native work, which is what we're kind of collaborating on here. So which is super interesting. My students are trying to create an indigenous sort of garden. They're planting sweetgrass right now and trying to indigenize the Mount Holyoke landscape. So And they all love This Land Is Part of Us. So that film is just such a
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, I
marvel.
should say that the teachers have been teaching more inclusively with regards to Native history. So I didn't think about doing the video, how my baby in that film would think of having her baby pictures and videos shown to her middle school class.
Oh, that's really funny. Yeah.
So that's a new dynamic that I've been trying to make more considerations now, like asking their permission before I take photos or share photos or videos, you know.
Okay. Well, you have to ask
with it, yeah, but yeah, shoot.
and you have to ask the beaded dolls what they think too, and so forth. All
Oh,
right.
see you
Hey,
tomorrow.
Nan, that's right. Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Good to see you, everybody. Okay. Okay, Emily, I'll let you go. Are you going to drive all the way home now? Is that
Yeah, I'm driving home.
okay? All right. We'll let you go. Okay, great. Bye-bye. All right. Bye-bye.